Israeli fury now in Lebanon. Mossad pagers kill targets. Hamas, Hezbollah and Houthis.
אני מסיים עכשיו ביקור באחד מבסיסי המודיעין שלנו. אני חייב להגיד שאני מתרשם עמוקות.
Israel radiates grim resolve. A year of genocide or justice? Can Israeli fury end this war? The big focus on 5 Live. The Israel-Lebanon war has escalated further in the last 18 hours. Earlier today, the Hezbollah, supported by Iran, launched even more strikes against Israel. This came after Israel launched a huge and concerted barrage of airstrikes at Hezbollah hideouts in Lebanon, which killed more than 585 people, according to reports, and over 1,800 people injured. The Israeli strikes have also neutralized, according to reports, 9 top commanders of the Hezbollah, including Fuad Shukra, who is one of the founding members of the Iran-backed group. Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released a statement insisting Israel will continue to pound Hezbollah, insisting Israel has information that people have missiles and rockets in their basements and that the group is continuing to use civilian human shields. Any house with weapons, arms and ammunition will be taken down, warns the Israeli Prime Minister. And joining us live and exclusive now is Reuven Azar. He is the new Israeli ambassador to India. He takes over at a critical time in the war, right before this conflict is a year old. Ambassador Azar, welcome to India Today Studios.
Thank you, Shiv, and happy birthday.
Thank you very much. Let's get straight to the big questions at this time. Ambassador, the northern front of Israel in Lebanon is where all the quote-unquote action is right now. And I hesitate to use the word action because there are very serious things happening there. We've seen pagers exploding. I'll come to that in just a moment. But the airstrikes that have taken place in the last 48 to 72 hours are said to be aimed at completely debilitating the Hezbollah. How is that going? 585 people killed, at least 2,000 people apparently injured. Is Israel achieving what it is setting out to do?
Well, Israel is trying to achieve a ceasefire for the last 11 months since Hezbollah, in an unprovoked way, attacked Israel on the 8th of October. And the aim of our policy is to implement UN Security Council Resolution 1701 that states very clearly that Hezbollah is not allowed to deploy on the Israeli border. If Hezbollah agrees to that, then there will be no war. There will be immediate ceasefire. But unfortunately, what is happening in the last few months, that despite diplomatic efforts led by the United States, this is not happening. And we have evacuated 70,000 people out of their homes in northern Israel as a result of these Hezbollah attacks. So we are determined to achieve our goal because our people want to go back to their homes. And in order to achieve that, we are now employing more force.
Yeah.
And what we did is that we targeted 1,700 military targets, most of them inside homes in villages in South Lebanon, to which Hezbollah introduced weapons and missiles, breaching international law, using in an immoral way the fact that there are civilians there in order to conceal weapons. We have gathered that intelligence, and actually, before we started, we encouraged all the people that are living in those places or near those places to evacuate immediately. This came in telephone calls, in flyers, in radio transmissions, in every possible way. And thanks to that, the number of casualties actually is pretty low compared to the number of targets that we have targeted.
But Ambassador, some would ask, when when the Israeli Prime Minister and the government have called for an evacuation of civilians, aren't these people, by Israel's own claim, being held there against their will as human shields? Where are they to go if they are asked to evacuate? If they are being oppressed by the Hezbollah, as the Israeli government claims, where would these civilians go is a question that many are asking.
Unlike the Gaza situation, in which Hamas actually shot at people at gunpoint and tried to prevent the evacuation, here you have a different situation because the territory of the southern Lebanon is wider, and we have seen tens of thousands of people, according to reports of the Lebanese government, already 500,000 people actually have been evacuating from these areas, which is a positive thing if we want to avoid more civilian casualties. But we are determined, Chief, we are determined to restore peace to our region, and therefore these capabilities that were built with Iranian support, with financial support, with training, with transfer of technology, this has to stop.
Yeah.
And we are determined. The Israeli public is united in the decision to do whatever it takes in order to remove this threat. And again, this could stop tomorrow or even today if Hezbollah commits and the Lebanese government commits to implement UN Security Council Resolution 1701.
Was there a tipping point? What was the trigger point, Ambassador? Because it's difficult to tell because there's so much happening. But, I was there in October and November last year for 3 weeks. And the Hezbollah, which is most certainly the most well-armed, perhaps the most well-organized of the Iranian proxies, the three H's, the Houthis, Hamas and Hezbollah, they've been, mounting concerted attacks, especially in the northern part of Israel, using anti-tank weapons, long-range drones and things like that. What was the trigger point now for this sudden shift, in Israeli might towards southern Lebanon?
Well, it's connected to the fact that, first
of all...
Or was
it preemptive?
Yeah, it was connected to the fact that, first of all, we couldn't, on the 7th of October, deal simultaneously with all the threats. We have a strong army, but it's not that big.
Yeah.
And we had to organize ourselves. We had to deal, first of all, with the threat coming from Gaza. And we did that. So in Gaza, you have a situation today in which most of the threat, the missile factories, the stockpiles, that has been dealt with. The Hamas army is defeated. They still have sporadic terrorist attacks at our forces. Basically, militarily, we've done the job there. We created a buffer zone. So Hamas cannot attack now Israel. It's a problem for them to contraband weapons from the Sinai because we are sealing the border. So once we have done that, we had the time to reorganize and to plan what we're going to do in the north. Before we started, we actually tried again to create a situation in which we avoid that, because we know that the price of war is terrible and the loss of every life is tragic. So our job as a democracy, as a country that is responsible for the life of its citizens, we have not only the right, we have the duty to protect them, but we have to do whatever we can in order to try to avoid violence. That's what we did. We waited for 11 months, and now it's time for the other side to understand that if they continue this, they are going to pay a dear price.
Could there be a ground invasion or a ground operation in Lebanon? It's not a far-fetched question because it has happened before. Israel has perceived to be a larger threat than just what is immediately being dealt with. And many experts and observers believe that the current airstrikes are basically clearing the decks for a large-scale ground operation or an invasion of Lebanon.
We are preparing for all scenarios. The IDF forces, our defense forces, have operative plans. We have recruited the necessary personnel, and we are completely ready to do that. We prefer not to do that, and we don't want to, escalate into a full-fledged war. But if we don't have any choice, we will have to do it because we have to create a situation in which our citizens can live in peace in their homes.
Speaking of Iran for a moment, because after the assassination of the Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, Ambassador Azhar, there had been almost a kind of suspense, a tension around the region and globally about how Iran was going to hit back. Now, a direct attack of any kind or what was perhaps in people's minds, that hasn't happened yet. What is Israel's assessment of that? Because one would have imagined that a country like Iran, struck in the manner that it has, even though Israel has not taken or claimed credit for that assassination, the idea of a direct Iranian involvement still sort of hangs in the air. It hasn't happened.
It hasn't happened, and I think for good reason. Last time that Iran attacked us with a barrage of 300 missiles, rockets, and drones, and ballistic missiles.
Yeah, that was in April this year.
That was on the 13th of April, and that barrage was successfully foiled by Israel and its partners in the region, including Arab states, including the United States and other Western armies.
Yeah.
The Iranians understood what our capabilities are. And although we haven't retaliated in a massive way, we have shown through a very targeted, in a very targeted way, what our capabilities are. I think that the Iranians are going to do a huge mistake if they decide to involve themselves here again. And we are ready for that scenario as well.
Speaking, one final question on Lebanon before we shift back to Gaza, Ambassador. These airstrikes, when they take place, they obviously don't take place for a short time. It looks like this is a precursor to a larger operation, and these airstrikes might actually continue. Does Israel, apart from the UN resolution that you were talking about, is there some kind of an end point as far as these operations in the north are concerned?
Well, we have to restore the deterrence that was breached. As you know, since 2006, Hezbollah refrained from shooting at our country, and they decided to change that policy. They made a huge mistake. They thought that Israel is vulnerable. They have accumulated all these weapons around Israel, not only in the Gaza Strip and in Lebanon, but also in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen. And the Iranians thought that actually they can successfully choke the state of Israel and that we are not going to be able to sustain that. Well, they were mistaken.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, these miscalculations create conflicts. You are an experienced journalist and you covered many conflicts, and you know that when people do miscalculations when it comes to the use of force, that bears a huge price. Unfortunately, we are in a situation in which this miscalculation led to a lot of casualties. The responsibility for all these dead people are on the shoulders of the Iranians, of these radicals that are turning our region into complete havoc. So we have a responsibility, together with our partners in the Arab world and our countries that are friendly to the cause, we have the responsibility to restore peace, to create a security regime that will be sustainable for the future, so we don't have to deal with this kind of threats in the coming future.
Speaking about those pagers exploding, this is one of those typical operations where there are a lot of claims and counterclaims. Once again, there's very little clarity over where things actually came from. Throw some light on that, because most people say, why is there even a discussion or an argument on this? Of course, this was an intelligence operation by Israel to infiltrate the Hezbollah and teach them a lesson with those exploding pagers, Ambassador.
Well, look, I cannot comment on a specific operation, whether Israel was involved or wasn't involved. What I think is important for the audience to understand is that war is changing all the time, and the nature of war is changing all the time. And in the past, you used to have either conventional armies that acted according to certain rules, more or less, and you had terrorist organizations that used to breach every rule, but they didn't possess advanced technology. What we are having today, as a direct result of the Iranian involvement in supplying technologies and training to these terrorists, is that you have terrorist armies that are equipped with sophisticated weapons and with capabilities that even conventional armies don't have. These proxies know how to do cyber attacks. This is something unimaginable, and unfortunately, this is what the world is going to get in the near future unless we defeat them. And therefore, for countries that respect the law and follow norms, it is very hard to deal with these people that abuse every norm and use our values against us by firing from hospitals, by manipulating media, and things like that. And therefore, we also have to think outside the box. if we want to defeat the terrorists.
Has the last 1 year been a surprise to the Israeli system in terms of the technology and capabilities that have been obtained by some of these groups? Like you said, cyber attacks. We've seen some long-range drone attacks as well, guided munitions.
Well, actually, when it comes to cyber and to drone attacks, this is something that we've been watching very carefully and preparing against. As you probably know, Israel possesses capabilities when it comes to missile defense and drone defense that like almost no other country in the world. So we've been able to foil more than 90% of the attacks that are coming from the air. It's not an impermeable system, but it's one of the best systems in the world. Also, when it comes to cyber, actually, Israel is one of the most attacked countries in cyber in the world. We have huge amounts of thousands of attacks every day. And we've been able, thankfully, since the 7th of October, to sustain all the attacks against us and maintain resilience and functionality of all our systems, not only the military systems, but also the civilian systems. Now, of course, the 7th of October was a huge surprise, and it was a failure, both intelligence failure and operational failure when it comes to the Gaza Strip itself. The question is, how fast can you recover from that? And thankfully, I think that Israeli society has shown immense amounts of voluntarism, of dedication, of conviction, and of cooperation in order to deal with the threat. We had to reinvent the wheel to a certain extent when it comes to fighting, for example, the tunnel threat. We probably didn't imagine that we would have to invade the Gaza Strip the way we did, because we left the Gaza Strip in 2005 without an intention to go back. Unfortunately, Hamas took over the Gaza Strip in 2007, got rid of the Palestinian Authority, killed them, threw them out of buildings, and this is the reality that we have to face.
Is the obliteration of Hamas, an objective that is within sight, within grasp of Israel?
Well, the term obliteration has to be looked at. We are talking about military obliteration. We know that ideology is something that is very difficult to root out, and this requires an effort from the international community to de-radicalize, because what has happened since 2007 is that Hamas has been indoctrinating children from the age of 2 to kill Jews, to commit their lives to struggle against Israel. And this has to change if we want to achieve peace at some point in time. We need to follow the steps of countries that have successfully de-radicalized, like the UAE, like the efforts Morocco is doing, like Saudi Arabia is doing. So there are examples to follow, and if we really want to have a future with our neighbors, and we want to have self-rule for the Palestinians, we will have to find partners that will help us to de-radicalize that society.
But Ambassador, whichever way you slice it, whichever account you accept as being close to the reality, what's happened in Gaza has resulted in a huge loss of life, possibly a lot of civilian life as well. What is Israel's assessment of it? Because Israel has been accused variously of genocide, of not really caring about civilian life during these attacks. Not for the first time Israel's been accused of that. What is Israel's assessment of how much civilian life has been lost? And again, I add the disclaimer that many of these civilians may not have had a choice to move away because of the presence of the Hamas.
Yeah, so primarily civilians in Gaza have been hijacked by Hamas, That's the sad reality. And what Israel has done is really unprecedented in terms of efforts of any modern army to take people out of harm's way, because we have developed tactics that no other Western army
But that still resulted in a huge loss of life.
Well, of course, every loss of life is tragic. But first of all, you have to take the data that is coming from Hamas with some salt.
I agree.
Because they have been including in these numbers people that have died as a result of misfire of their own rockets, natural deaths, and they have, according to their counting, no terrorist was killed. We killed more than 15,000, according to our estimates. So when you look at the ratio between terrorist hit and civilians, and you compare it to other urban scenarios that we've seen, for example, in the fight against ISIS in Mosul, there the ratio was 1 terrorist for 8 civilian casualties. Here in Gaza, you have a ratio of 1 to 1.5 or 1 to 2, which actually is completely unprecedented given the deepness of the embedding of terrorists in the civilian population and the tactics that they have perfected in the abuse of installations that should be impugned according to international law. But international humanitarian law also says that when these installations are abused and are breached by terrorists, they cease to be impugned. So as much as we made an effort to avoid casualties, at the end of the day, many people have died, regrettably. But these accusations of genocide are completely fabricated because, people are using terms without understanding what these terms are. In the Gaza Strip, when we entered the Gaza Strip the first time in 1967, there were 200,000, less than 200,000 Palestinians. Do you know how many Palestinians there are now in Gaza? More than 2 million. So what kind of genocide is that? Okay, it's completely fabricated, and it's basically, perpetrated by media outlets that support radical Islam, like Al Jazeera and other media outlets that are daily trying to create blood libels against Israel.
Ambassador, you spoke about radicalization and that, military obliteration is one thing, but like we've seen in this West Asian crisis, it works like a cycle. The violence comes in cycles, then there's a period of peace, and then it erupts once again. We've seen it between Israel and Palestine a number of times. You've served in the military and as a diplomat in all your years, so you know it better than most people. My question now is, this time round, is it going to be just another cycle? Some kind of, terms will come on the table, there will be a period of peace, but no real assurance that things won't flare up again, because after this much violence, an entire generation will probably be ready for radicalization once again. And that's what the Palestinians have said before as well. You kill one of us, more will come out.
Well, there is several elements that come as an answer to that. First of all, the fact that Palestinians in Gaza were indoctrinated for the last 17 years to attack Israel has resulted in the 7th of October. So saying that our response to the 7th of October is going to radicalize the Palestinian population in Gaza, this is complete nonsense, because they have been radicalized before the attack. Okay, that's number one. Number two, look, the region of West Asia, as a result of the absolute chaos that came after the Arab Spring and the failure of the Arab state system, has created chaos and radicalism. And you have it in countries that are disintegrated for a long period of time with no connection to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So 500,000 victims of the civil war in Syria have nothing to do with Israel. Okay? 10 million people that are suffering starvation in Sudan have nothing to do with Israel. 1 million people that have been killed in Iraq in the last 2 decades have nothing to do with Israel. The civil war in Yemen has nothing to do with Israel. But what is the common denominator in all these conflicts is that you have radical elements that have arisen as a result of the decay of the Arab state system, and there are cynical players like Iran that are manipulating the situation in order to gain hegemony in the region. So as long as the international community doesn't put pressure on Iran, we are going to continue to suffer from these conflicts, and we'll have to defend ourselves time after time after time.
As a former soldier, as a career diplomat who's seen the good and the bad of this constant effort to make some kind of equilibrium and peace, do you think something should be done differently this time around, Ambassador?
Yes, I think that I'm very optimistic, and I'll tell you why. Because what I'm seeing during this conflict is that our partners in the Arab world haven't backed off or haven't backed down from their positions to confront this radicalism and to stay in touch with us. We've been cooperating quite deeply, both in intelligence and operationally. We've been able to create a shield to the skies of the region against the Iranian attack. Okay? And if we show resolution together with our Western partners, with other countries that want peace, like India and other countries, we can create a corridor of security and stability and peace and prosperity in the West Asia, because we have enough partners to do that. The only thing that we have to show is resolution against the radicals. We have to have the backing of international organizations, of the US, and if people are going to think that West Asia is a lost cause and there is no reason why to continue investing in this region, then of course those who want to terrorize the region will win.
Yeah.
We want to prevent that, and Israel will not move from the region.
One final question, Ambassador, in that case, speaking of partners, India, as you know, does have special relationships in this region with Israel, with Palestine, with all of your neighbors as well. Do you see some kind of a special role for India in whatever unfolds now?
Well, I think that India has an increasing role in our region, not only because it has interests in the region, but also because very important players in the region want to engage with India in different ways. So I think that once this war is over, we will be able to go back to plans that we had to create a corridor of connectivity between Asia and Europe. This is in the cards. Yeah. This is achievable, and I'm sure that India will be a major part of this effort.
We look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thanks for taking our questions here in India Today, Ambassador Reuven Azar of Israel. It's a story that we will continue to track very, very closely right here.
Kangana under fire once again. First urges centre to bring farm laws back.
किसानों के हितकारी लॉस वापस आने चाहिए और किसानों को खुद इसकी डिमांड करनी चाहिए, और ताकि हमारे किसान भी जैसे बाकी जगहों पे समृद्धि हो रही है, हमारे किसान की समृद्धि में कोई ब्रेक न लगे.
Then makes a U-turn, apologizes.
किसी को डिसअपॉइंट किया है, मुझे खेद रहेगा. I take my words back. Thank you.
Star MP embarrasses BJP again. Congress fires mentally unstable giant.
मेरे को लगता है वो मानसिक रूप से वो परेशान है, मानसिक बीमार है कंगना.
Is Kangana BJP's problem queen? Top focus on 5 Live.
Well, the BJP's Himachal MP Kangana Ranaut is learning the hard way that an outspoken actor celebrity doesn't always make a smart politician, and most definitely not during election time. Well, Kangana Ranaut has landed herself for the third time in a soup on the same issue, the farm laws issue. She said the farm laws should be brought back, triggering an unusual and instant chup karo wave from BJP leaders, one after the other. They're all very sensitive right now because of the Haryana election coming up, the whole Punjab issue in general, and therefore Kangana Ranaut has once again been pulled up and chastised by the BJP leadership, that too in public. It's embarrassing. Take a look.
किसानों के हितकारी बिल जो वापस लिए गए थे, तो पूरा देश जो है चौंक गया था. वो किसान आज भी वहां बैठे.
The queen of controversy is back. This time, actor and BJP MP Kangana Ranaut has triggered another storm over farmers by advocating for return of 3 farm laws that were repealed by the centre in the aftermath of massive protests.
तो देश के विकास में किसान जो है वो मेन हमारा एक पिलर ऑफ स्ट्रेंथ है. तो मैं चाहती हूँ कि वो खुद ऐसी अपील करे कि भाई हमारे जो 3 लॉज जो हमसे जो सिर्फ और सिर्फ कुछ एक राज्यों में जो है उन्होंने उसको लेकर जो है आपत्ति जताई थी, मुझे लगता है कि उनको मैं हाथ जोड़ के उनको विनती करती हूँ कि सब किसानों के हित को ध्यान में रखकर जो है वो लॉज जो है वापस मांगे.
BJP was quick to distance itself from Kangana's statement.
ये बयान कंगना रनौत जी का व्यक्तिगत बयान है एवं भारतीय जनता पार्टी की तरफ से ना कंगना रनौत जी ऐसा कोई बयान देने के लिए अधिकृत हैं और ना ही उनका बयान जो पार्टी की सोच है 3 कृषि कानूनों को लेकर उसको दर्शाता है.
The BJP clarification, however, wasn't enough to quell the firestorm. Congress launched a scathing attack, calling Kangana mentally unstable and accusing her of being addicted to controversy.
मेरे को लगता है वो मानसिक रूप से वो परेशान है, मानसिक बीमार है कंगना। और नहीं यार, कुछ लोगों को ना आदतन हो जाती है कि मैंने कंट्रोवर्सी खड़ी करनी है, तो नहीं, बार बार बंदा ऐसा करता नहीं है। आप, मेरे को लगता है कि उसके ऊपर हमें तरस खाना चाहिए।
बीजेपी की एक सांसद जब ये कहती हैं, जिन्होंने अभी किसानों को हत्यारा और बलात्कारी बुलाया था, और अब वो कह रही हैं कि कानून वापस आने चाहिए, तो बिल्कुल चिंता होगी, बिल्कुल दुख होगा, क्योंकि बीजेपी का अभी तक कोई अधिकृत बयान नहीं आया है। किसी एक प्रवक्ता ने कुछ बोल दिया, उससे क्या फर्क पड़ता है? बीजेपी के अध्यक्ष जेपी नड्डा जी हैं, वो इस पर बयान दें, स्पष्टीकरण दें, लिख कर दें, बोल कर दें।
NDA allies have also condemned Kangana's remark.
ये कंगना का अपना व्यक्तिगत स्टेटमेंट हो सकता है एंड ज़रूरी नहीं है कि हर स्टेटमेंट में आप कमेंट करें, ये उनकी अपनी सोच हो सकती है। बट जब तक अधिकृत तौर पर उनकी पार्टी की तरफ से कोई ऐसी बात नहीं आती, मुझे नहीं लगता कि किसी भी हर बयान पे कोई भी टिप्पणी करके उस कंट्रोवर्सी को बढ़ाने का कोई मकसद है।
नहीं, उनका ये वक्तव्य किसानों का अपमान है और प्रधानमंत्री द्वारा जो फैसला लिया गया था उसका उल्लंघन है, और पार्टी को ऐसे वक्ताओं के लिए संज्ञान भी लेना चाहिए और कुछ कार्रवाई भी करनी चाहिए।
Under fire from all sides, Kangana was forced to retract her statement.
मुझे ये बात भी ध्यान रखनी होगी कि मैं अब एक कलाकार नहीं, भारतीय जनता पार्टी की कार्यकर्ता हूँ, और मेरे ओपिनियंस अपने नहीं होने चाहिए, वो पार्टी का स्टैंड होना चाहिए। तो अगर मैंने अपने शब्दों से और अपनी सोच से किसी को डिसअपॉइंट किया है, मुझे खेद रहेगा। I take my words back. Thank you.
Since being elected MP, Kangana Ranaut has quoted controversy at least 3 times. All 3 times she had to climb down and apologize. Will she now be more mindful of her words? Bureau Report, India Today.
And Rahul Gandhi has also opened fire at Kangana Ranaut, the BJP MP. He says, who is deciding the government's policy? Is it a BJP MP or is it the Prime Minister? Listen into what Rahul Gandhi has just said.
ये बीजेपी के जो लोग होते हैं, ये आइडियाज को टेस्ट करते रहते हैं। ये किसी से कहते हैं कि आप ये आइडिया पब्लिक में रखिए और फिर रिएक्शन देखते हैं। यही हुआ है। उनके एक सांसद ने किसान कानून, जो काले कानून थे, उनको रिवाइव करने की बात की है। मोदी जी, आप क्लैरिफाई कीजिए, आप इसके खिलाफ हैं या आप फिर से बदमाशी कर रहे हैं? क्या वो किसान के कानून रिवाइव करेंगे या नहीं? और अगर करेंगे तो फिर मैं आपको गारंटी दे रहा हूं कि इंडिया गठबंधन पूरा इनके खिलाफ खड़ा हो जाएगा। 700 लोग शहीद हुए हैं, उनकी याद करनी है, उनकी रिस्पेक्ट करनी है। मोदी जी ने 2 मिनट मौन नहीं रखने दिया था, हम ये कभी नहीं भूलेंगे।
I want to go across to India Today's Aman Bharadwaj for more on this story. Aman, Kangana Ranaut, not for the first time, has come out and, retracted. She's apologized. But it appears that the BJP has gotten into the habit of pulling her up, and this time they've done it quite publicly as well. What is Kangana planning to do? Is she planning to be careful going forward, or how is it going to work out? She's not used to being careful with her words.
See, it's not for the first time that Kangana has to be warned with several statements that she made. In last 30 days, she had made several statements that sparked controversy, whether it was movie Emergency, where she quoted Indira Gandhi and Bhindranwala scene, that also sparked a controversy and protest, and even the Sikh communities has to issue a separate press releases against Kangana Ranaut, and that was the reason that Emergency movie was not able to be released for the fixed date, 6 September. After which she made statements that in Delhi protests that held in 2020 for the 11th months, the incidents of rape and murder happened, for which BJP disassociated themselves first from Kangana and had to clarify the statements at several platforms. So it's not the case that Kangana is making such statements for the first time. Even she faced the slap controversy in June here in Chandigarh as well. So it's not for the first time that Kangana has been pulled up by BJP, or she has to apologize, or her statements will making a controversy. But politically, BJP is preparing themselves for elections in Jammu Kashmir and Haryana. So these sort of statements are affecting their political strategy as well. You see here in Haryana, Kanori border and Shambu border, touching the border area of Punjab and Haryana, are witnessing protests from last 10 months. And several farmer leaders are present over there, which are demanding for the justice and for the demands that were promised in 2020 at Delhi protests. So even that are not fulfilled. But when Kangana Ranaut makes such statements that she called Khalistani, or she made statements, so that sparks a controversy. But now has to see, because farm leaders have also demanded that she should be disqualified. Sedition charges should be placed on Kangana. She should be booked.
Let's see whether the BJP decides that they've had enough and they take even stronger action against Kangana, or whether they're willing to give her a longer rope. It's a sensitive issue. In fact, Aman, thanks very much for joining me. Earlier, the last time that Kangana had said something that quote-unquote embarrassed the party on a sensitive issue of farmers and the farm laws, Kangana spoke to me right here at the India Today studios, and I asked her if she feels like she needs to censor herself more now that she's a member of parliament. And just 2 weeks later, she's landed herself in a soup again. Here's what Kangana had told me just a couple of weeks ago. Being a politician, being a new MP is an easy job, Kangana. And even now, are you feeling like you need to censor yourself? Are you feeling like there are things you can't talk about? Your party has just sort of distanced itself from you talking about the farmer protests, which is, I have to say, this is a topic that you've spoken about repeatedly. So obviously it affects you. It comes from within. You've spoken strongly. You've had strong views about it. And it seems like maybe being outspoken, another word that's attached to you all the time, is not suitable in your new role as an MP. Are you feeling the pressure or feeling the heat on that?
I agree with whatever party has said. I'm not the spokesperson for the party that needs to be conveyed, and I'm glad that they did. Besides, they have completely disowned my stance to this matter. They have their policies, and I need to be aligned with those policies. And I do trust I do trust in my party, and I do believe that there's nothing more important to me than this party, because, and it's coming from a very genuine place, especially having worked on emergency and to see how they evolved from Jan Sangh to Janata Party, and how even Bharatiya Janata Party is an offshoot of that, and how many people for how many decades have just given their blood and sweat to have this party where it is. And to me, the party matters the most, because that's, of course, my bandwidth is that, and I do believe in them, and to them nation matters the most.
But do you find yourself now having to think about or decide not to say something? The reason I'm saying this, Kangana, and this comes from a genuine place, which is that you've been looked at as a person who speaks her mind. There is no editing, there is no censoring when it comes to Kangana. She speaks her mind. And now suddenly you can't speak about an issue that very many people, and mind you, many people even agreed with what you said about the farm protests, etc. The analogy you may have drawn may have been controversial, but there were people who actually agreed with what you said. So did someone call you and say you can't be speaking like this?
Yeah, of course. Of course I was reprimanded, and that's fine. It's fine with me. I do not think that I am the final voice of the... I have to be really crazy and stupid to believe that. And I do believe in the guidance of my superiors. I do believe that's how every system works. That's how army works. That's how corporate works. That's how the party works. There are people who are superior to me. There are people who are free to reprimand me, and there are people who are, without having to explain, to tell me what to do, and I'm okay with that. I do believe that my intentions are obviously, at times my intention may not come across as what it was, but I do have a long way to go, and I do believe that if I've genuinely heard their cause, and I've genuinely heard their their position or policies, there is nobody who's going to be more hurt than me. Like, there's nobody I know who will be more hurt than me. So I'm looking forward to be careful with my words and be aligned with their policies, because for them, Bharat rehna chahiye. हम रहे ना रहे भारत रहना चाहिए. So that is the larger ambition of the party, and I'm totally aligned with that ambition.
The title of the session is How Women Are Redefining Indian Cinema. Couple of years ago, it could have been how Indian cinema is redefining women, and I don't want to stick to cliches because I think we're in a very different space right now, and it's been a marquee year for Indian cinema. Richa, your film, Girls Will Be Girls, has won at Sundance. Richa and her husband have produced that film. You have Puneet Monga, who's an Oscar winner, and her film, Elephant Whisperer, last year won at the Oscar Best Documentary. And congratulations, Kiran. We hear Kiran's film, Lapata Ladies, is our entry to the Oscars this year. And, what is very reassuring, and I'm not saying as a woman, but in India, is that you all happen to be women. It's not, oh, you're women and you've done so well. But most of these films that have done so well on an international platform, which has practically showcased India and put the spotlight on India, have actually come from women. And, that's a great part. But to begin with, Guneet, you want to give some tips to Kiran? You're fresh off the Oscar rack, and Kiran is hoping to win it for us, another one this year.
No, I will definitely say that Lapata Ladies is definitely the best Hindi film of the year. So it's one of course, my favorite. It's so beautiful, and so glad to meet you today because this news came only yesterday. But yes, it is, I think, the few stages, which is the shortlist and the nomination, and you get to a top 15 and then to a top 5, and that only, there is a campaign that I feel like, I always feel that we have little time. It has to start as of yesterday. I constantly feel like hopefully our nominations are given as early as possible so we can gear up for a campaign which is getting all the voters who are in the category to get us to a shortlist. It is technical, it is difficult, but it is what every country goes through. And there are certain norms and certain things to do there. But yes, step one will be just get out there and, get going. Roll up the sleeves. It's time to flex, and it's time to put a hoarding on the moon.
Sisters in solidarity, sisters in arms. There's so much one can keep, speaking of that. But Kiran, there's also somewhere down the line, just because you're a woman producer, a woman director, to go with the burden of trying to give out a social message through a film. Do you think, that bears on you sometime, especially during Lapata Ladies, or was it just a byproduct? Because it was very breezy in a lot of ways.
Yeah, well, actually, the story spoke to me, I think, particularly because it was a story of two girls searching for their freedom, for their opportunity, for their voice. So I think stories like that interest filmmakers like me intrinsically, especially because I feel stories of women and by women we do not see enough. I think it's exceedingly important that we invest much more in women storytellers, in producers, in actors, in projects helmed by women. So I don't think it's a byproduct. I think, in fact, if anything, it made me realize that I'm actually most keenly aware and most keenly interested in women's experiences. And I'll probably continue to want to have interesting and nuanced women characters in everything that I do.